Morning, everybody. Hope you can hear me. We're now ready to go ahead and start. So, hello. Thanks for joining us this morning. It's another PMO Flash Mob. And before we get going with the webinar, I'd just like to say that one of the reasons why we've got this one today, it actually comes from the PMO conference last year. And we had a lot of feedback from people on Flash Mob that had been there and saying it's a really good session. So we thought, let's do it again and get it to a wider audience so that people can hear us. So what you're going to be listening to today is to Guy. Guy works for an organisation called PPO, and they're based in South Africa. And I think you'll probably hear this in his accent when he starts talking. Just an interesting thing, actually, the South African tourism slogan is actually called Inspiring New Ways. So hopefully today we'll be able to inspire you with some of the things that Guy is going to be talking about today. So we've got Guy who's doing the session. We've got Taryn who's also going to be facilitating it. So I'm going to hand over to you guys and yeah, please take it away.
Lindsay, thank you very much for the opportunity to do it again. I think it's been almost exactly a year since your last PMO conference. So I've had to dust this one off in the last week or so to get ready. But thanks for the opportunity, awesome opportunity for myself and the organisation, PPO, to present this. I see people are still joining, so I'm going to start in the meantime. Just some housekeeping quickly. We've muted all the people so that we don't get a lot of background noise and all the rest of it. The chat functionality is working at the bottom of your screens. You're more than welcome to chat amongst each other, chat with Lindsay, chat with Taryn, who will help facilitate the session. Any questions you may have, please raise them on there. We'll deal with them at the end, and Taryn will feed them through to us. We are also recording this webinar today, so this webinar will be sent out to everybody who has attended today, as well as those that, for whatever reason, have missed but have registered so that they can watch it later. So if there's a good content slide that you like or something, don't worry. I'm sure within the next 24 hours, 48 hours, the ladies will have the webinar up and ready and the link sent to you. So thank you very much, Lindsay, for the opportunity once again. I've been working in the project portfolio management space for probably close to 20 years now. The company I work for, as Lindsay alluded to, has an office in South Africa, which I'm currently at. I don't know why, considering that it's the middle of winter in South Africa and summer in Europe. I should actually be in our London office, but we operate an office out of London which looks after the Americas, Europe and Asia, and then one out of South Africa where the company initially started. Taryn, I see there's a lot of chats coming up, people saying they can't hear, so I don't know if that's something we need to address. Lindsay, I don't know if yourself or Taryn can hear clearly.
Yes, I can hear you clearly. I would just ask that everyone double check that they've not muted their speakers on their PC if they're using their PC audio. It seems like some can hear and some can't. Most can hear, I think.
Okay, I see a bunch of chats saying people can hear fine. Julie says she can hear. Andrea says she can hear. Vicky, Jenna. Okay, so I'm going to carry on, and I'm sure the team will help those on the side who can't. So just a bit of background. PPO is an organization, as I said, that's been around for almost 20 years now, working in the project portfolio management space, a wide range of clients, servicing both, financial services, consumer goods, banking, finance, a lot of insurance work, healthcare. So we have a broad range of clients across all different sectors and industries, which is great for us because we really get to experience and see and work with a lot of project-based organizations across the different areas. Primarily, we started as a software company developing a tool called Project Portfolio Office, but are also involved with implementation of methodologies, helping organizations establish PMOs, the change management journey of establishing and getting a PMO running, and then obviously a lot of thought leadership presentations, speeches and those type of things. But moving swiftly along, what I want to cover today is really just a focus on toolkit optimization. And when I say the word toolkit, your toolkit could be an Excel spreadsheet and a crippled PowerPoint presentation. It could be some software as a service platform like a project portfolio office. It could be some customized internal platform you've built. It could be one of the Gartner product, a SAP PPM module or something like that. The principles that I'm sharing today don't differ too much depending on what toolkit you use. And what I'm hoping to do is share some of the learnings and experiences we've had over the years talking about toolkits. And as I said, it doesn't matter what that toolkit is. I hope the lessons today are something that you can apply irrespective of where you are in the journey and what type of toolkits you have. This was research done a couple of years ago around over 200 organizations that went through a PPM implementation journey. And what they found, unfortunately for software vendors, is that the software functionality actually counts very little to the success of the implementation of the project. The effective user adoption is the key. So whether you've created an Excel PowerPoint, which is going to be used for status reportings, and a PowerPoint deck that needs to be used for steercoms, and a SharePoint page where you register your projects, or whether you've gone for a fancy, shiny piece of project portfolio management software, the user adoption is really the key to the success of this. Yes, you need organizational change management, people change to get them to accept and adopt and understand the new way of work and the new things that we're doing. And obviously the tool needs to align to your process so that we can try and, as best possible, mirror your toolkit to your existing process. But the key thing is user adoption. And I'm going to share some lessons today with you around some of the user adoption things that you can be doing or should be doing to mature. Now, maturity itself is a difficult thing, and I think a lot of people discuss it, and I meet with a huge amount of C-level execs on a monthly basis in the work that I do, and a lot of them don't understand why their PMO managers are constantly talking about maturity and, ask me questions like, but Guy, what does a more mature PMO actually give me? Because those are the things my PMO manager is doing. And ultimately, really, project management maturity just refers to a progressive development of project management approach, methodology, strategy, and decision-making. And the key is we're all driving to improve the maturity of our project organizations to give us greater project success. So when I meet C-level execs, I say project maturity directly correlates to greater project success, and greater project success correlates to us achieving our strategic goals and our objectives that we've defined. The key thing to understand, I think one of the key lessons and one of the first things I want to share with you today, and I'm sure some of you know this, so bear with me, is maturity is not something that the PMO does on its own. I think a lot of organizations we work with try and drive their PMO maturity to have good tools, good processes, strong people, all those good things. But unfortunately, the maturity of the PMO is fixed within the organizational maturity for project portfolio management. So if you are not looking at the maturity across the entire organization, the big purple ring around the outside, which is impacted by your suppliers, your industry, your customers, your partners, I think there's the first lesson. You cannot have strong PMO maturity without organizational maturity. Unfortunately, you need to bring those things in. You are dependent on HR for resources. You're dependent on finance to pay your suppliers on projects. You're dependent on the industry and some of the legislation that's coming out. So all of those things impact the organization, and they impact the maturity of the organization to deliver project portfolio management. I talk a lot when I meet with clients and organizations around people, process, governance, technology. And the second lesson is when you look at maturity on any scale, this is the normal 5-point scale where you start at level 1 and move up to level 5. The key thing is you need to look at all of those different elements. So once again, you now need to look at governance, process, people, and technology. And one of the things I've found is, most organizations unfortunately feel that they are more mature than what they are. Some of the clients we work with, some of the organizations I've been involved with have done formal maturity assessments and given themselves a benchmark and know where their gaps are and have created a roadmap to address it. Most haven't, but are typically somewhere between the level 1 and level 2. One of the things that I always say to clients is a level 1 organization will still be able to deliver successful projects. So it's not that you at level 1, which I define as awareness, it's chaotic, it's ad hoc, but you do have individual heroes. And those heroes are good project managers, good project sponsors and owners, and they typically do get projects successfully executed. But unfortunately, it's not a sustainable process that can run on a day-to-day basis, and we cannot push through lots of projects through that. When we get to level 2, we start having processes that are being used but in isolation, and then level 3 we start to have standardized use of processes. But the reality is you have to understand where your current maturity is when you look at the governance, the people, the process, and the technology. And if your organization looked something like this, then you would have a situation where your level 1 awareness, where your effective maturity level is somewhere approaching a level 1. So in this organization's example, governance is something that they're weak at. Governance are your decision-making boards, your forums that approve projects and activate projects and do those type of things. And in this model, because that is weak and not mature within the organization, that drags the overall effective maturity. They've got strong processes, they've got decent people, the technology is not so bad, but the maturity around the governance is the problem, and therefore they drag back. So unfortunately, what you need to do as an organization is assess where you need to be from a productive point of view around maturity and then decide how to plug those gaps. And unfortunately, I wish it wasn't like this, but technology is not the silver bullet that fixes all of this. So in this example, your technology is lagging behind and you want to get to somewhere like 2, for example. But in order to do that, you'll have to step up your toolkits, so maybe moving off the Excel spreadsheet and PowerPoints into something a bit more sophisticated or a better use of your existing toolkits, but you're also going to have to step up your governance. So the governance decision-making forums will have to be looked at. Your process, you could probably forgo a bit. Your people, you don't need as strong and certified project managers potentially to achieve a level 2 or 1.2 in the 1.5 in this example, but you would have to look at things like the governance and the technology. So the key message here is that when you're trying to improve your PMO maturity, software alone is not going to do that. Certifying and training all your people alone is not going to do that. Developing a very sophisticated methodology and processes and templates is not going to do that. These things need to be in balance and they need to align with each other so that you drag in the maturity across all the different elements forward as and how you mature. Okay, I've put this slide in for content. Lindsay and I had a long debate whether we keep it in or not, and we've agreed it's good content for you guys, so we're keeping it in and you'll get it as part of the recording. But it really just defines that there's obviously project, program, and portfolio management maturity, and what I've defined there is the levels 1, 2, and 3 around what it is. So using these definitions, you should very easily be able to quickly assess, if you look at project management as an example, what level are you if you were to look at these. A level 2 organization, does the organization ensure that each project is run with its own processes and procedures to a minimum standard? There may be limited consistency or coordination between projects. Level 3 is where you have a centralized process, but projects are allowed to flex and suit their particular projects. So this is a good definition to see where you are in terms of those levels of maturity without having to go through a formal PPM type maturity assessment. One of the key things that I always do when I look at the toolkits is I explain to clients that, like anything in life, I suppose you have to start somewhere, but you can't do it all together. So one of the key lessons that I've learned in maturing a PMO and trying to use technology to do that is to avoid using every piece of feature and functionality that your toolkit has. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes. You go through a rigorous process to understand what your toolkit needs are. You identify all the features and functionalities that you may need or want to need. You go out in the market and you look at all the tools in the market, and they've got even more features and functionalities, things like prioritization models and what-if scenarios and benefit models and all these things which you know we're close to doing currently, but because the tools have them, they become your list of requirements. And then as soon as you elect whichever toolkit it is, you then launch it off trying to achieve everything in the toolkit that's physically possible, because while the vendor's around or while we're going through an implementation project, let's make sure we use it all, which is really one of the biggest lessons learned in all the years that I've been implementing toolkits, is one of the worst things to do. So I always sit with the clients in the organizations and I say, let's visually look at all the different services that your PMO offers. Let's look at all the different things that it is that you do. And based on that, let's identify 2, 3, 4 of the top things or the biggest pains that you have where we can start the journey of maturing our toolkits and therefore maturing our PMO, but getting some victories. And it comes down to that user adoption. If we can get the users to adopt the toolkits that we're going to deploy in such a way that they get good value and they start to depend on it and they love it and it becomes something that they're comfortable using, then we can quite easily extend the features and the functionality or start addressing more services or start getting into some of the stuff that we may be wanting to do but never got to over time. But if you go from nothing to trying to do fully automated processes, action logs, risk logs, prioritization models, benefit tracking, all those type of things which you're not currently doing in your PMO, then you start to break that maturity immediately. You push too fast, too quickly, and more importantly, you don't align all the pillars. So your technology becomes very mature, but your process, people, and governance don't support that, and therefore the user adoption won't last. So I do a lot of work with clients where they say, we're in a big mess. We've got a lot of projects, massive spreadsheets, PowerPoints, all this stuff. We've got a PMO that just consolidates data and they push it around. And as soon as they've done that, the week starts again and they keep doing the same thing. And almost in all cases, it comes down to these three services. So I've identified these three as the key for today. If any of you want to know more or have a pain in one of the areas that's not one of these, I'm more than willing to share data with you, share experience with you. You're more than welcome to contact me. I think my details are at the end of the presentation. But these are the three that I want to focus on today. So the one talks about project activation. The next one talks about progress reporting, and then something that I'm seeing more and more of is the whole resource capacity management and planning. So even though the PMOs that I work with in and support do a various number of things, those typically tend to be the 2 or 3 key services that we focus on initially. And when we implement the toolkits, we typically focus on those things. How do we enable project activation better? How do we get some good status reporting out on the portfolio so that we can allow for the decision-making forums and those people to see what's going on? And then how do we manage the resource capacity views and graphs and plans and toolkits? Because those always talk to how much projects we can do and the pipeline that we can carry. So, lesson, don't try and use all the features and functionality. Focus on some of the key things. Out of that, identify the top services that you have, and then set up your toolkit. I'm going to talk today about activation, status reporting, and resource management. Okay. Somebody drew this picture for me once, and I got it done up nicely by the marketing team. But, a lot of PMOs tell me that projects start everywhere. Out of Exco, based on legislation, by a Manco, from internal audit, from external audit, every single place. And I say to them, well, one of the first things that a good PMO can do is have a central place to start all projects. And whether that's a SharePoint page that you put out in the organization, whether it's a template you send to everybody and they fill it in and email it to the PMO, whether you physically come into the PMO and request a project, whether you use a piece of software like Project Portfolio Office and register your project, it doesn't matter what your toolkit is. Protecting and starting the project activation process right is one of the key things. I always tell organizations projects don't go bad or end bad, they start bad. They start badly, they're not well articulated, people are not on board, they don't understand why we're doing this, and then you just drag those projects in your portfolio all the way through. So one of the things we need to look at when we assess project activation, and if we're going to use our toolkits to improve activation and have a single, centralized, strong way in which projects are put on the register, whatever format that register is, and activated, then we need to assess what level maturity are we at and what level do we want to get at. And once again, the maturity levels can differ looking at different things like resource planning, like risk management, like cost management. But one of the key things you'll have to do is try and figure out where are we in the maturity around project activation, and based on that, to get to our effective maturity level, what do we need to do? So these are some symptoms that I've seen. You cannot become a level 1 organization from a maturity point of view, talking about activation, if you haven't clearly defined what's a project and what's BAU. One of the key things I find organizations doing is getting confused between projects and BAU, and then even calling things BAU projects or, those type of things. But if you don't have a clear definition between what's business as usual and what's projects, that's your first symptom, in terms of being able to address it. No single place to register projects, a lack of effective sponsorship early on, and no consolidated project register. I attended Exco for a client a couple of weeks ago, and one of the projects on the portfolio actually had the CEO as a sponsor on the project. And when we pulled the project up at Exco, he wasn't even aware that he was a sponsor of the project. And that's a direct symptom of the fact that there's no formal activation where these things are done formally and agreed and contracted. So projects just tend to pop themselves onto the list as and how they come up, and that's one of the symptoms. So this is a slide that will help you figure out which of these symptoms you have, and then you can self-diagnose yourself in terms of what maturity level you are when it comes to project activation. Moving on, and where the value I think hopefully for you guys are today, guys and girls today, is what can you do about it? A lot of organizations have done this, but they haven't done it formally. They haven't communicated it. They did it 3 months, 6 months, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. The organization has changed. The people have changed. But one of the first things that I would recommend you do if you're at a level 1 maturity, irrespective of what toolkit you are using or want to use, is develop a simple definition of what a project is. It astounds me today still how many organizations I work with who can't clearly define what a project is. So I'm never sure whether to apply this to the project management methodology or whether to go to the project office to run this or whether they try and do it themselves. Here's some value for you. Any of the slides that have the example icon in the top left-hand or right-hand corner is something I'm happy for you to take away and gain as part of today's webinar. But really a simple project definition that will define what a project is, give it a duration, be clear that it requires certain motivation around resources or funding, and every client's project definition is different, and every organization's project definition is different, and some I've seen are 1 month, and some are 3 months, and some are a certain rand amount, and some are a certain complexity, and some are if they impact on X number of people or processes. But the reality is you need to have a project definition, and anything coming through the activation funnel and going onto your Excel spreadsheet or into your shiny PPM tool needs to meet the definition of a project. The last thing any project office wants is to be trying to run BAU as projects, but the last thing that any CEO wants is their organization to be running long strategic projects as BAU, because they know that's not the way to get things done. So lesson learned, one of the key things you can do is simply define a project. If you've done that, share it widely, put it everywhere you can, make sure everyone has access to it. Once you've done that, create a consolidated project list. One of the last clients I helped, I met with all the chiefs in the organization, and I asked them how many projects were running, and the numbers were between 12 and 30. But having spoken one level down to all the other people as part of the maturity assessment, I got the feeling there was significantly more going on. So we quickly went round to every area. We took the definition of what we defined a project to be, which everyone was happy with, and we said, just give us the name, description, objectives, benefits, basic 5, 6, 7, 10 things on your project that we need to know, and we put it into a spreadsheet, and we came up with just under 100. So very quickly the organization realized, because they don't have a central place to activate projects, because they don't have some sort of toolkit that is used across the entire organization, projects start everywhere and exist everywhere. And the key thing with that organization was they were battling to get anything delivered, and the delivery was based on the fact that they had just too many projects in their portfolio and no visibility. So next thing you can do, create a consolidated project list. It won't be perfect, you won't have all the information, but it will be a starting point to have a conversation with the ManCo, the ExCo, whatever the decision-making forums are, to talk about projects and what we should be doing going forward. The next thing you have to do is define some sort of project approval process, and then moving into level 2, a central place to enter all projects. And as I've said, doesn't matter whether that's a template that you complete and fill in and send to the PMO and they put it on the Excel spreadsheet, whether you write it on the whiteboard outside the PMO, whether you put it into your PPM tool. I don't think it matters as long as there's a central place that every single project, once the idea pops up in the organization, goes onto the register. Define a simple categorization model so that you can T-shirt size these things, large, medium, small, complex, not complex, those type of things, and constitute a portfolio review committee. I can't tell you how much value there is in having a good portfolio project review committee, a forum of business people who get together on a regular basis and look at new project requests coming in and activate it. And whether you have a decentralized PMO, centralized PMO, an enterprise PMO, business unit PMO, I don't think it differs in terms of doing this. Get the management team together, depending on how wide the PMO's mandate is, and make sure that on a regular basis, new ideas, new requests are looked at, screened, and activated. If you can do that, you'll start to alleviate some of the pain and pressure, and you'll start to create that central door where all projects are registered in the same way, they all go through the same funnel, and based on that, you activate them. As time matures, you'll get quicker and faster and better at being able to screen the projects, being able to fall into the strategy. Will get better, but if you don't start the journey, you'll never get there. And I've seen organizations do it with a Word template, fill it in onto an Excel spreadsheet. Every Thursday, The 3 or 4 new projects get discussed at Manco. They have a project review committee as an agenda item, go through the projects, challenge each other, and decide to activate the project. It's a simple thing to do. It's not difficult to do. You don't have to create another forum to do it, but get the key decision makers around the table, whether that's EXCO or MANCO or your business unit area, irrespective of what level you operate at, and start to create some visibility around the portfolio with the key purpose of activating projects and considering the current status of the portfolio. Okay, level 3 is where you start to look at proper strategic contribution to projects and those type of things. And a lot of organizations I work with have manual templates, and they ask questions like, which of our strategic pillars does this project report under, or what percentage does it contribute? But in an immature environment, it's normally very difficult to actually assess that, and means very little. You have to have a strong strategy that everybody understands. That needs to be broken down into execution plans. You actually need to be doing proper benefit management in the beginning to say, what are the benefits we're going to get, and how do those benefits going to get measured, and how do those benefits impact our scorecard and our execution plans to really do this properly. So don't complicate it and try and do strategic alignment in a low-level organization. Your management team would be more than adequate to determine whether or not they think this project complies to our strategy and supports subjectively in the beginning, and as in how we build the discipline and the maturity, you can get to fancier models. Okay, and then ultimately, as I said, recording quantifiable business benefits as part of registration so that we actually start to force the requesters of these projects, typically the project owners, to start really thinking about what benefits will we get from this project and start to articulate it. But it's something that you can only start to do with maturity and as in how you progress. Okay, I'm going to move on, and I said I'll take questions at the end. Project status reporting, I think, is one of the key things. Irrespective of what your toolkit is, I think you need to ensure that as a PMO, you can provide credible information on the status of the projects. If you can do that on a project level, you'll be able to roll that up to the portfolio level. So once again, the symptoms. I often find projects where the entire portfolio is green. Everything is green. And you ask people what green means, and green means very different things to everybody. Green means there are problems, but we have it under control. Green means there are no problems. Green means we don't have a benefit statement yet, but because we don't have one and we can't measure against it, it's green. So one of the clear things on a symptom from a level 1 maturity when you look at status reporting is a clear definition of the indicators and what they each mean. And I think it's one of the key things that the organizations must look at. When you get to a level 2, you're starting to have isolated success around status reporting, but still an inconsistent use of templates, and worse, an inconsistent frequency. So you may get some reports on a weekly basis, some on a monthly basis, some never, some you get more regular, some in different formats, different templates. But it's very difficult to do proper portfolio reporting, any type of status reporting as to where we are, if you don't have consistency in the format, the frequency, and more importantly, the definitions or the criteria of what makes it up. So, unfortunately, formalizing status reporting is one of the key things you'll have to do at a level 1 organization. Standardize what I call the reporting heartbeat. I'm sure most of you understand that. A heartbeat is something that's regular. It should beat on a regular basis. It shouldn't beat on a Monday and then skip 2 Mondays and then beat again on the next week, Monday. If you go to the doctor and your heartbeat looks like that, they typically put you on medication. So it's something that needs to be on a regular basis. You need to be constantly dipping into the projects and reporting. Whether that's monthly, weekly, every 2 weeks, every organization will determine that in terms of how quick and fast their projects move. But it should be something that happens on a regular basis. Good project managers have no hassle with this because they run regular meetings, whether it's daily stand-ups or weekly progress meetings or monthly steer comms. And in order to facilitate that, they are producing status reports to do that. So it's something that they're very good at doing, but it requires a level of maturity. Develop a status report template and then start to use it. Here's an example of one. It's very simple. It doesn't ask for a lot of information. It has basic static project information in the top around the project, the type, the status. I always look at commentary and project health, RAG indicators, if you want to call it that, red, amber, green. And I always read those first from a status report point of view, because they generally are the subjective view of the project manager and say a lot more to me than the raw data around costs or risks or schedule or those type of things. So basic commentary, what is this project? How well have you done? Are there any concerns, challenges, those things? Basic health indicators around the health of the project, whether you look at risk, cost, benefit, time, quality, whatever they may be, and then you can go into detail around the views of the schedules, the risks, the issues, those type of things. But you will not mature your PMO irrespective of your toolkit if you don't create a standard status report template that everybody uses. This is an Excel one, send it out to the people. If you've got a PPM tool, these type of things should come out of the box. The reality is, unfortunately, is that you need multiple. And one of the big mistakes organizations make, and they typically make this, unfortunately, when they're using toolkits like Excel and things like that, is they have one template that everybody gets. So that detail one I showed you is great if you're the project team and you're working on a weekly basis, but when you roll that up into the sponsor level for Steercom, or you roll that up into the portfolio review that the PMO needs to take to Exco, you're overwhelming them with what they will see as data and not a lot of information. So I think one of the key lessons learned is, irrespective of your toolkit, you need to start to tailor those dashboards at the different audiences. Start simple. Have a team status dashboard, have a steering committee dashboard, and have a portfolio view. And take out of this lowest level information the bits and pieces you need from Steercom, and then take a even smaller subset up to Exco, and using the same information that the project managers produce once, you create the different views. But having one status dashboard with all the information at all the levels will not get you that maturity, and will definitely not get your executives tuned into the type of reporting that they should be looking at. Okay, one of the key lessons learned as well is define what red means, define what amber means, and define what green is. And this is not just for your project managers. This is even more important that you do it to your stakeholder community. You need to explain to the executives, the management team, the people that are using the reporting and making decisions on the portfolio, what red, amber, and green means. So that when they see scope is red, costs are green, progress is amber, whatever these things may be, they understand what that means. I often, when I start implementing a toolkit with a client, is I define the definitions with the team, and for the first couple of months when I publish the reports, I publish it with the guideline attached to it so they can keep reminding themselves what it is. I stick it in the PMO, I put it into the Steercom decks so that we can start to talk about what red, amber, green means, and when something is amber or red, we can quickly assess where it is. Here's a simple example of one looking at progress, scope, and costs. And you very quickly define what those things are. Any one of you that have been in any one of Lindsay's sessions, she talks about watermelon projects, those ones that are green on the outside and red on the inside. That's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid those things where, the status reporting says it's green, but because we don't understand what green means and because it's a very seasoned project manager, they think they've got everything under control and get it back on track, but inside that thing is bright red. So having those standards is key, and no toolkit implementation normally deals with stuff like that. These toolkits have these type of things, and they presume that PMOs have gone through this pain of establishing these, so we're just going to apply it. But I think it's key and important that irrespective of what toolkits you're going to deploy or are using, that red is defined, amber is defined, green is defined. And it goes further than just the health indicators. If you ask things like percentage planned, progress, those type of things, those also need to be defined. How do you measure project budget? Is it only the external cost? Is it the internal cost? Is it the labor cost? What components do we talk about when we say project budget? So I think those things are all key to define, and you won't get to a level 2 maturity unless you start to define those. Okay. Level 2, acknowledge only status reports adhering to the reporting heartbeat and using the defined template. And that's tough for organizations, but you have to start to say to your organization, we're trying to improve our maturity, we've implemented a toolkit, and if they're not using the standard template or the status dashboard that has the PPO logo in the bottom right-hand corner or whatever it may be, then please don't accept and use those status dashboards so that we can drive all the focus and attention onto a standard, consistent set of status reporting. And it's difficult because executives are normally the worst because they like it in this format and that one wants it in this format and this one wants it in their PowerPoint. But you have to get to a standard set of reporting that is consistent, a across the organization or across the business unit. A couple of things that I've seen working quite well, and maybe it's a whole topic for a different day, is the gamification. Status reporting can be something that is painful for project managers. It can be something that actually dilutes user adoption. A lot of organizations approach us to implement our toolkit, and really the number one thing they want is visibility of their portfolio, which they don't have, and then they want regular real-time reporting. But they've never gone through the pain of actually doing it manually. So they've never gone through the Excel spreadsheet of creating a list of projects, making sure every project manager does status reporting on a monthly basis. So now all of a sudden you implement a tool and you're expecting that discipline and that rigor is automatically implemented. Yes, it's significantly easier to do a dashboard on a tool like PPO, but it's still something that you're introducing that's new and that's different and takes time. So one of the adoption mechanisms we've been driving is gamification, where like the Facebook stuff, like any of these reward programs, you get certain rewards and likes and comments and those type of things for status reporting, and it starts to drive the behavior and the value. We took status reports at one client, printed it out as they came in, stuck them down the corridors, and put sticky notes there that as executives came past, we asked them to take a sticky note, stick it on the dashboard, and give us a comment or give us a thumbs up or make some comment on it. And then the project managers start to see the value that the environment is starting to get by consuming the reporting and being able to see it. So something that you can look at when you get to a level 3 type maturity, something like that. And then the last one, and I know Lindsay and them do a lot about this, and I know it was one of the topics I think at last year's PMO conference, is the storytelling. I think project managers, all of us, I'm an ex-project manager, a reformed project manager myself, we're very good at presenting data, but we're not very good at presenting information or telling stories. So it's something that you have to coach and guide your project managers into, to start not just showing detailed schedules and percentages and variances and, risk factors, but start telling the story or start translating that into good information and storytelling. And that you only get to at a level 3. You're never going to get there if you don't have consistent reporting. You're never going to get there if you don't define standards. You're never going to get there if your toolkit is not simple and effective to use. But once you have all of those other things in place, you can start to focus on the storytelling as opposed to the provision of data. Okay, and then last couple of slides quickly on the resource management. This was something that I didn't see for many, many years in the project portfolio management space. It was something that everybody knew we needed to do. It was one of the knowledge areas, all those good things, but we never did it. But came, 7, 8 years ago, all of a sudden it almost became the number one thing that organizations are looking at. We at PPO run a benchmark PMO survey in South Africa of all the PMO organizations. And last year we had, I think, close to 200 organizations or 200 people that completed the survey. And one of the key things that came out there once again was resource management. We need to get a better handle on what capacity we have, what that capacity looks like in terms of demand, and what the utilization is. And it's just a direct result of people wanting to do more and not having the resources. And it's not a capital, it's not a money thing. You can throw more money at the problem. It's the physical people being able to do the work with the skill that they have within the organization. So once again, one of the symptoms, if you're trying to do resource capacity planning or being able to produce a demand view or a capacity view for your organization, is something that you need to be able to do to support the decision of getting more resources or doing less projects or whatever one it is. Some of the symptoms would be a clear lack of understanding of the current capacity. The clear lack of understanding of which resources in the org chart are BAU resources and dedicated full-time or 50% or 80%, and how much capacity certain people have for projects. I'm astounded when organizations approve projects and put things into the pipeline, but cannot tell you that within the IT team, this level of capacity exists for BAU and this level of capacity exists for projects, therefore change. So it's one of the key symptoms. You can never become a level 1 organization, irrespective if your toolkit is a fancy PPM tool or an Excel resource spreadsheet, if you don't have a clear understanding of which resources in the org chart have a BAU function and what does that capacity look like that we've earmarked for that. Going further, if you have no insight into the demand for projects, so a lack of schedules, a lack of understanding of what resources are required where, or you have no formal process to actually request resources from line managers, from resource managers, you can never get to a level 1 when it comes to the resource planning. I'm not going to go to the level 2s and 3s for today. They're in the deck. But what are the key things to do? It sounds crazy, but I recently did it with another organization where I said to every general manager, take your org structure and give me a list of anybody who could, should, would, and has worked on a project, and then give me a list of what percentage of their capacity is not available for projects and is BAU. And it took some of them almost a month to give me that view. They only had 5 or 6 people in their org structure, but they couldn't actually clearly differentiate how much of this person's time is actually BAU work that they need to do on an ongoing basis and how much is projects. It's easy for a project manager because you say 100% for projects, but if you're in the IT space and you're talking about architects and those type of people, what percentage does exist for that? If you're talking about security people, if you're talking about those stuff, what exists? If you're in the engineering space, how much of those engineers are there to keep the lights on and do those things versus how much of them are spent working on projects? So a very simple exercise. Get a list of resources that are available for project work. Amend your project request template, amend your PPM tool, amend whatever toolkit it is, and ask upfront on day 0, what type of FTE would you think this project needs and for how long? So that you very quickly can scale and size a project on day 0 based on the resource demand. It won't be accurate, it won't be perfect, it will mature and get better over time as you do more of it, but it's a starting point to start asking the question, how do you think this project can be resourced from a people and effort point of view? And as I said, it will get more accurate as you mature, as you go through planning. Your initial estimates might be horribly wrong and you'll see the differences, but if you don't start asking the question on day 0, you never get to that maturity. Once you have that view of what capacity we have within the organization to do projects, create a capacity view. Whether that's an Excel spreadsheet with a big macro, whether that's your PPM tool that gives you these type of views, it doesn't matter. But there's nothing better than seeing the sanity and the clarity for executives when you present them a view that says, this is our current organization. Everybody knows we have a headcount constraint. This is the physical capacity we have for the next 6 months for projects. Forget about demand, forget about who's really allocated to projects, just start with capacity. This is the number of hours we have per resource type for the next 6 months to work on projects. And normally the lights go on and the people start to understand. No wonder nothing is happening, no wonder we're not succeeding, is because we suspected or thought or hoped that we had significantly more capacity to do stuff, and that's why everything is not coming out. So have that resource capacity view. Once you've done that, you then need to start getting more sophisticated and more mature and stepping that up to the next level where per resource in your capacity pool, you start to do things like charge out rates and skills and allocation. So now we actually move into the demand space. And if we're doing things like skills and charge out rates, we can actually start to correlate that into cost and those type of things. But if you don't start with a base capacity, trying to do the next level is impossible. Then one of the things you need to start doing is recording the actual time spent on project work. And I'm not advocating that you launch timesheets on everybody, but there's no better way to actually give a view of what people are working on than having the actual time spent. And whenever I work with organizations and they do timesheets, I'm never the one who makes them introduce timesheets, but if they do, I always use the timesheets as a forecasting mechanism for how much time was actually spent doing certain activities, whether that's BAU activities, whether that's business requirements specs on an IT project, or whether it's design work on an engineering project. There's no better indicator of how much time it actually takes us to do things than looking at the actual time. So it's something that most organizations start to realize that even though timesheets is a horrible thing to do, and I've seen people ask people on a spreadsheet without doing a timesheet, just allocate your percentage time spent, or a CFO trying to capitalize costs, trying to get that view. But look at the actual time spent for project work and then start to do that. Resource attributes, I said previously, is very useful. Knowing more about the resources, their skill levels, their job levels, their departments, maybe the countries they operate in, maybe their standard working hours, their charge out rates. Those things are always very useful as well to understand. Okay, and then you need to govern the resources and proactively communicate capacity around the pipeline. And I think that's always the challenge is PMO managers sit in these forums and projects get added into the portfolio, but in their hearts they know that they don't have the right resources, they don't know they don't have the capacity, but you can only get to that mature decision making around which projects to do based on capacity, based on resources, if you start at the level 0 maturity, build the list, get the capacity blocked out, understand what the actuals are, and step it up to that level. And it takes time. It's not something you're going to do immediately. Then you can start to prioritize the resource requests based on the strategic value. So what I've shared with you today is some of the things that you need to look at. And the bad news, if you came here today thinking I'm going to introduce a toolkit and it's going to take away all my pain, is there's significant work that needs to happen to support a toolkit implementation. Whether it's an Excel spreadsheet that you standardize project requests or status reporting, or whether it's your new PPM tool you're about to launch into, you have to go through this process, unfortunately, of saying, you know, maturity sits within an organizational context. I need to make sure my pillars are aligned. I need to understand what maturity level I'm at and where I want to go to. I need to clearly define what a project is. I need to have an activation forum in place to be able to activate projects. I need to standardize reporting formats and templates. I need to have different messages for different audiences. I need to define the different stakeholders, and then I need to have the resource efforts. So my lessons learned for you guys today before I field some questions is look at the maturity from an organizational context. There's no such thing as a PMO maturity. I've seen organizations invest lots of time and money in improving their PMO and not dealing with that with the organization. Make sure you keep those pillars aligned. Don't go and get the fanciest, sexiest piece of project portfolio management software you can if you don't have strong governance, process, and people. Don't go and appoint some fancy consultant to come in and develop a very sophisticated methodology with a whole bunch of templates and think that your process problem has gone away if the people running projects are accidental project managers or business people who don't have that inherent understanding or knowledge of project portfolio management. User adoption is key. Whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or a SharePoint page to register projects or a PPM tool, you need to constantly be saying, how do I get the users on board, making it as simple and effective for them as possible. No organization will ever get value out of any toolkit in the PPM space unless the users love it and want to use it. So it's something that you must constantly ask. You don't need to have a change manager for every implementation. It's always good to have, but you need to, everything you do, ask yourself, will our users adopt this? If you try and release every piece of feature and functionality that this piece of software may have, already I can tell you your user adoption will be low. You will flood them with stuff that they don't get good value for or don't even understand. Set yourself an appropriate goal maturity. I meet with a lot of PMOs who are at a level 0 point something and say to me that by Christmas I'm going to be at a level 2. That's what's on my KPI. That's what I've committed with my boss. And I tell them to stop right there because there's no way that they can get there that fast. And I don't think for their organization they will get significant value by maturing to that level so quickly. So if they got to a good level 1 maturity by Christmas, that's something that may give them value and will start to address some of the pains and challenges they have, and then they can step it up a year thereafter. And then the last one is focus on the key services. So don't look at features and functionalities. Don't look at workflow and automation. Don't look at data consolidation. Look at the key services. If projects start anywhere in the business and there's too many projects, start with activation. If people don't trust the data or don't understand the portfolio, do status reporting. If resource capacity planning is a problem because we have too many projects and too little resources, start with that. If you're a governance organization that requires rigor around process and templates and those things, start with that. It doesn't matter which one you start with, but identify 2, maybe 3, and activate your toolkit to support those. And once the user adoption comes, you can easily extend that into the other areas. And I think that's all I've got to share with you for today. There's my contact details. I'm on Twitter for those of you that use it. There's my email address. You're more than welcome to send me an email if you have a question outside of this or want me to share something with you or need any advice or guidance or assistance you may need. Taryn, I know you've been fielding some questions. We've got a couple of minutes left. Don't know if there's any specific questions you'd want me to answer.
Yes, please, Guy. I've got about 4 questions for you. If you aren't able to address all of them in the session, we will try and answer that after the session. But the first one being, how do you change a culture where red is seen as failure rather than a flag for support to remove barriers?
You know, it's one of the biggest challenges I've had, this fear of red. Nobody says anything's red because as soon as it's red, now all hell breaks loose and you have to do all these other things and people are saying you're a bad project manager. It is unfortunately a culture. It's something that starts from the top down. You have to create that culture that says saying a project is in trouble is one mechanism to start to ask for the support and help that's needed, typically not by the project manager or the team, but a level higher. One of the things I've effectively seen and heard about that organizations have done is within the PMO is they've created a project support community so that when projects are red or amber, those project managers get together on a weekly basis via WebEx or Telecon or in person if they can, and they talk to each other about the project, why it's red, what they think they can do, and they provide support. And it starts at that level with project managers knowing there's a support mechanism in place for them within their PMOs to go to a group of their colleagues to talk openly about the challenges they have and get the support and understanding and sometimes ideas from their colleagues around what they could do to potentially improve it. And then immediately they are more comfortable talking about some of the challenges and creating that visibility. But at the same time, you have to start that with the executive level. You have to say to the executives, I'm going to show you a portfolio of your projects. These are the investments that you run in. And red tells you that intervention is required. I think a lot of people don't do that well in terms of engaging with the executives, but one of the reasons they don't is they flood them with too much information. So they're not clear with the executives as to this is what red means, this is the intervention we require, and we're only highlighting these 3 or 4 projects to you this week because those are the ones that we need your intervention. They send them massive amounts of reports, hundreds of PowerPoint decks, and it's very difficult for the execs to see the difference there. All the exec feels is the frustration of projects not happening, and that's when the culture starts to build up to say, well, I'm not going to say this thing is red because then all hell breaks loose. But it is a culture thing, and you have to start by supporting the PMs on the lowest level and then changing the executive understanding that red means we have a bad investment within our portfolio and we need some key decisions taken or some key interventions from you guys to help us through that process. But it takes time. Having good, credible reporting will definitely help, and having the standards behind that understood would also definitely help. Taryn?
I've got another one for you. What kind of soft skills do you think PMO practitioners need to be developing or improving on to mature themselves?
Yeah. So, I mean, the number one, and there's lots of skills, but I mean, communication, storytelling, stakeholder management, I think those are some of the key things. I mean, a good project manager has the ability to connect with stakeholders, communicate, create the right messages, share knowledge, those type of things. It's one of the first things I look for in a project manager. The technical skills, I think we all know these days, can be gained and got, but those skills of being able to communicate, and especially when projects are in trouble, then the communication and the ability to tell those stories and articulate is even key. That's the number one thing I look at. Leadership's important, but communication, being able to manage those stakeholders and tell the story, that for me is the key one that I always look for.
Our audience is still listening, so I've got another one for you. How do you make the case for using a maturity model?
So I think the first problem is, we've done a couple of maturity assessments. I don't know if the question is using a model or paying for somebody to do an assessment, but one of the challenges that exists in the market, and I don't know why, is that a maturity assessment, a formal maturity assessment being done on an organization is a time-consuming and expensive exercise. Now, I don't know why that's created, but we've done maturity assessments for large organizations in 4 to 6 weeks at a good cost, engaging with the entire organization. I think it's incredibly important to do, and the reason it's important to do is you look at the maturity across the organization and you gain access to all levels within the organization, not just the project office. And those conversations alone, meeting with the chiefs at the C levels, meeting with the executives a level lower, start to help create that understanding of project portfolio management, the value of the PMO, those things. It typically happens that most execs don't understand what this PMO does and what it should be doing. But those maturity assessments that you do, starting with the interview process and going through that, starts to create that dialogue around it. So I don't think it's difficult to do. I don't think it's expensive to do. We've done them before fairly quickly and effectively and been able to then craft a roadmap. And the good thing of doing it like that is you get a roadmap that takes the entire organization with you. So it's not a PMO roadmap that's been built in isolation. The entire organization goes through that. And some of the gaps that exist that need to be plugged via the roadmap came out of the areas that are non-PMO but are impacting on the maturity of the organization. So I don't think it's a difficult thing to do. I think it's something that is quite easy and practical to do, and it's something that we've had some good success with as well. For some of the clients we actually do who don't have the time or the energy or sometimes the budget to do it, we've actually done a very quick self-assessment with them of what their maturity is so that gets benchmarked before the Toolkit implementation. Once again, I said it earlier, people generally feel they're more mature than what they are. So if you think you're a level 2 and you try to implement level 2 type features and functionalities in an organization that's, not even approaching 1, it's one of the big mistakes you make. So you have to acknowledge what maturity you are, whether it's a formal assessment or a quick self-assessment, and then pitch it on that level. But I don't think it's difficult or complicated to do. Taryn, let me take one more before we close.
Okay, the one more that I'll give to you is if you are running a predominantly agile project delivery methodology, how will the maturity model help?
So, agile is a delivery mechanism, and a lot of our clients and a lot of the organizations we're involved in working towards that. Some of the maturity models that I see still are applicable very much so to agile. What I find the number one mistake organizations make is not articulating what this project is about, what we're trying to achieve from it, and truly understanding the size and scale of it. So, if you don't do that properly, you sit with a significant bunch of projects in your portfolio, and whether you're delivering it waterfall or whether you're delivering it agile, investing company time and resources, which was always a constraint, on the wrong things or things that we don't clearly understand why or badly sized in terms of knowing how much effort this is really going to take is a challenge. So the maturity model doesn't look too much at the delivery mechanism. It looks at the prioritization of projects, the activation of projects, how you deal with risk management, how you deal with stakeholder management, and those things are still applicable in an agile world. I think some people unfortunately think that once I go agile, I can forget about stakeholder management, I can forget about risk management and those things, and they're even more crucial. They require these dedicated teams, they require regular communication and all of those good things. So that model still exists. When you do a maturity assessment, and this might come back to the question you asked before, is you decide which components you want to assess. So you don't have to necessarily assess all the components. They're called threads, and you decide which of those are important for you to assess so that you can start to see what it is. And it's dependent on the type of organization you are, the industry in which you operate, how governance focused you are, how agile you are, how quick you are, what type of funding you have, your shareholder structure. So those things all dictate which threads you will assess when you do a maturity assessment and where your focuses would be. I think that's the best I can do. I'm very happy to answer questions via email. I know some of them are probably still with Tony, and we'll come back to you in the next day or two. I'm happy for you guys to contact me if you want to, and I can field some questions on Twitter or LinkedIn or on my email box. Over to you, Lindsay. I think if there was some good value today, I'm doing another webinar in a month's time. They make me do these every month, and that one is a lot refocused on resource capacity management. So we've done a bunch of exercises with organizations where they're really under pressure, and we've said to them, if you go through a very simple process, we can very quickly give you that view of what your resource capacity is. That's great information for you to take to your executives to start the conversation about how big the portfolio should be, how much projects we're doing, headcount, those things. It's a starting point. It doesn't give you, the end result in a clean portfolio, but very quickly you can create that credible information. So if that's the type of thing that interests you, you can join me there again. But Lindsay, if you're around, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity and hand back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Guy. I hope you got a load out of that. I normally take notes and I can't. There's just so much stuff in there and lots of ideas buzzing around in my head. So thank you, everybody. Flashmob takes a break for the summer. We've been doing loads of stuff more recently, and I still not had time to write it up and share videos and stuff. So there's more coming. But thank you once again to Guy and the team at PPO. The recording will be coming out. It will be directly from them, first of all. We'll all have it on the Flash Mob website. We want the slide decks because you're going too fast and there's loads of stuff in there that we want to have a bit of a dig and poke around in. So thanks, everybody. Have a great summer, and we'll see you in a few weeks' time. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Darren. Cheers all.
Thank you.